Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our S&D press conference. I hand over to our group president, Iratxe García Pérez.
Buenos días. Good morning to you all. Thank you for coming along to this press conference. We have roughly 20 minutes today, a slightly shorter slot. So let's try to keep my introductory statement brief. As you know, the key debate this week will focus on an issue that is topical for all three institutions. It's all about the single market. The whole idea is to deliver on the single market, ensure certainty and predictability for EU businesses, create high-caliber jobs. The single market is the cornerstone of the EU. We can see that it is a success story if you look at the statistics and the quality jobs created and the certainty offered for citizens. It is vital important for us when tackling this key issue of the single market that we present it from a social and human point of view. It is what sets us apart. We have the European social model. Of course, we are grappling with major challenges. We need to overhaul, modernize our markets and businesses. We need to finalize the single market. But all these changes affect people on the ground. That means that we must factor in the social dimension in all our discussions. We need key legislative proposals. We cannot sacrifice democratic control or scrutiny. We need protection of workers. Europe needs progress rather than empty policies. It would be inconsistent to have, on the one hand, a proposal to reduce bureaucracy, simplify and backslide on much of the progress in Europe. And then on the other hand, we are talking about sprinting forward with legislation. I think we need to take time to peruse these proposals in detail. The S&D group wants to see a competitive Europe. Of course we do. But we need a competitive Europe that protects the workers and the environment. True competitiveness is about high social standards, consumer standards, labour laws and the like. We cannot have a race to the bottom. What we need is proper assessment of all proposals. That is key. As far as we are concerned, we need an employment law. We need to be ambitious when it comes to high quality labour law. We need to look at minimum wage guarantee for general interest, services of general public interest. So how can we ensure competitiveness in Europe? There is an issue that comes up in this connection, the whole idea of legal migration. Legal migration. We're not saying this. All major institutions and organizations have stated this fact. Europe needs more workers to see through the changes and challenges that we face. We are seeing an aging Europe. We need workforce in place, and so it is vitally important that we tackle the issue of legal migration. This is being addressed by some member states and by the right and far right in this House, presenting migration as the major problem facing Europe, and I don't think that's a particularly smart approach. We need extraordinary measures to deal with the extraordinary challenges we face. So we need a strong single market. And we need a strong budget. We cannot do more with less. We need sustainable revenue. We need a resilient EU budget. We are very concerned about the lack of progress in Council when it comes to reforming the own resources system from 2020. This Parliament must be firm in its stance here, as we were when talking about issues in connection with the multi-annual financial framework. We're talking about 4 new types of levy on crypto assets, a digital levy on major tech firms, a levy on extreme wealth, and a levy on online gambling. We would be looking at 1% on gambling. That would be an interesting proposal. We need to look at the amount that could be brought in. It could be a significant amount of money. So 1% of revenue on online gambling could yield 400 million a year. Consider how many policies we could see through affordable housing for young people. I think it is well worth our while considering all options and taking a serious look at this. That will be part of our debate this week. We look forward to a Commission statement on new own resources from online gambling and betting. That debate will take place Wednesday afternoon in plenary. Those are some of the issues that we will address, though those are our priorities for the part session. But of course, I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Gracias, Iratxe. Now it's time for your questions. I'm looking around. I see that Max, please start.
Hi, Max Guerra for Politico. 2 questions. On one hand, regarding the midterm, 7 months away, but there's some movement. The Liberals say they could support any candidate that commits to, making the centre work, the centre's majority work, and to block the far right from getting vice presidencies. Of course, that's sort of opening up to Mezzola's potential third term too. You say you have a deal in which, you would get to nominate the president of the parliament in the second half of the term. I wanted to ask for a reaction on that, on Renew's comments, for a timeline on when you will make a decision on who's running for you, or on the other hand, what concessions you're ready to take in order to support Metsola. And then on the other hand, I wanted to ask about the US trade deal, the final trilogues tonight. Would it be enough for the Socialists and Democrats group to have the sunrise clause baked into the suspension clause, so not an explicit sunrise clause? Is that enough, or do you fear that perhaps parts of your group wouldn't be able to support the deal like it happened with the Mercosur, and perhaps the centrist platform wouldn't be able to deliver this US trade deal if the Commission doesn't give enough? Thank you.
Gracias, Max.
Thank you, Max. Let me start by saying something about what's appeared in the press regarding the midterms. And what I'm going to say is I'm not going to make a statement on that, because obviously there have to be negotiations internally within the Parliament in the first instance. And midterm decisions will be made in due course, but obviously the midterm is actually at the beginning of next year. Therefore, it would be prejudging the issue. We, of course, are focused as Socialists and Democrats on serving the interests of our citizens, and we very much want to focus on that. We want to focus on, for example, the cost of living. We want to focus on what interests our citizens. They're concerned about the crisis in the Middle East, for example. We're concerned about how Europe should be responding to the housing crisis we have, or the social policy issues which concern us. So there are very many issues which are further up the priority list because they're much more pressing at the moment than the midterm decisions, which will take place in due course, depending on what the positions of the various political groups is. The position of my group, of course, is that we are the second biggest group in this chamber, and we will proceed on that basis, but I'm not going to comment on press speculation because the negotiations for the midterm arrangements haven't even begun yet. When they do, they will take some time, and when these negotiations really get underway, of course, we will take a responsible position. Then, in terms of the agreement with the US, I think that we're all aware of the fact that this Parliament has a role to play in these negotiations. We've been saying this throughout. The position has a position on the agreement itself, and what we need to do now is continue the negotiations with the co-legislator, the Council, in the trialogue format. I won't say a great deal more than that because I'm not part of the negotiating delegation, and therefore I'm not apprised of all the details of the sunset and sunrise clauses and any kind of emergency provisions or safeguard clauses that might be the subject of further negotiation. We do have the safeguard clauses which were put forward by us because we said that we need a number of safeguards to ensure that this agreement, if it comes into effect, is based on mutual respect between the European Union and the US. And so I'm fully confident that the negotiators from the Parliament delegation will abide by this position, which has been our position throughout the recent months. Thank you.
We have a question online. If David Carretta, please, David.
Yes. Thank you very much. David Carretta, Radio Radicale, Italian Radio. Can you hear me?
Sorry, can you put it a bit louder?
Can you hear me?
It's the technique. Could you put it a bit louder? We can hear him not. Yes. Okay. Please go ahead, David.
Okay. Thank you. David Carretta, Radio Radicale, Italian Radio. I would have two questions. The first one on the deal with the US. Do you trust the European Commission that the Commission will act in case of something going wrong on the other side of the Atlantic? Is it the main problem of this negotiation in the trialogue today? The trust of the European Parliament or part of the European Parliament toward the Commission? The second question is on Meloni request to use the national escape clause for defense to make more deficit to help people and companies in Italy because of the energy prices. What do you think about this request? Thank you.
Grazie.
Sobre esta cuestión en concreto.
On that specific issue, I'm not familiar with the proposal, and I would not dare comment on a matter that I am not fully briefed on. I would need to look into it and offer an opinion at a later stage. We need to properly look into the matter, and I really don't know enough about it. Turning now to the first question, whether we trust the European Commission. Well, the Commission plays a key role in trilogue talks. It is a guarantor of all possible agreements together with the Council. It's not whether a matter of trust or lack of trust. The Commission knows full well the position of this Parliament and this political group, which happens to overlap with Parliament's position in this case. I'm sure that the Commission will do its best to find the right landing ground, a position that would be acceptable to both Parliament and Council. The Commission must facilitate an agreement between the Council and Parliament when it comes to this agreement with the US, and I trust in the Commission to play its part.
Are there further questions, Laura, please? And then in the back.
Thanks. Bueno, Laura Zornoza para la agencia EFE. Tenía una pregunta de...
I have a follow-up question on the midterms. Has the group actually got some kind of time frame in mind for its deliberations? Are you going to select a candidate internally? And if so, are you going to have internal hearings? What is your plan? Would you be anticipating doing anything before the summer? Thank you. Well, right now, we're involved in important debates on the priorities of the social democratic family and how we respond to the huge challenges facing Europe. That's really our priority focus. That's what the European citizens expect of us. If I go asking a citizen in the street back home what they would like the Socialists and Democrats in Europe to do, then it is my genuine belief that what they will say to me is that they would like us to try to bring down the prices of energy, heating oil, or create jobs for young people, or affordable housing for young people. I do not think they'd be interested in internal political deliberations in this House. And I've already mentioned, I think that in terms of timing, this is a decision which won't be taken until the beginning of 2027. This is May 2026. We've got huge challenges, indeed crises on our doorstep. And therefore, that's what has to be our priority focus, because that's what the citizens need, want and expect of us. This is where their focus lies. They're not focused in the same way, to the same degree, on the internal comings and goings and minutiae of negotiations here at this point, which are really not relevant to their daily lived reality. The Socialists and Democrats are absolutely focused on serving the interests of our citizens, and we're not engaged at all internally in mid-term discussions as yet. Thank you.
Buongiorno. A proposito del dibattito.
Thank you. I'd like to...
I'm sorry, Alessandro Cisilina.
Alessandro Cisilina, I'm from the press agency in Italy. I wanted to raise a question regarding today's debate on the Middle East and Israel and the new problems with the current flotilla. There's a debate, as I understand it, without resolution. Could you comment on this debate? And could you comment on whether you think this is sufficient in terms of the Parliament having a clear position? I'd also like to ask you about the association agreement with Israel. We've heard the group leader from the left saying that she's a little more optimistic than she was a year ago about the Parliament's position, and a little more hopeful that the Parliament might consider suspending the agreement because of the intervention by specific individual governments, such as the Spanish government, that's already taken place. So I would like to know what the S&D position is and whether you share Manon Bry's optimism. And then a final point, there are some very serious accusations that are being levelled at the European Commission. For example, complicity in genocide, violation of international law. These are exceptionally serious accusations that they are condoning these actions by Israel. So could you tell us what you think, what your position is, and whether you think that you can endorse that commission?
La posición del Grupo de Socialistas.
Thank you. Well, our position as Socialists and Democrats is completely clear. I think it's been completely clear since the beginning of the most recent hostilities in the Middle East, and it remains equally clear. We want the suspension of the cooperation agreement between the EU and Israel. And we've also been very critical of what we call complicity and silence on the part of the European Commission. I don't think I could have stated our position more clearly than I did in the last session, when I said it's absolutely shameful. It's shameful that I hadn't heard the Commission or the EPP utter one single word on the death penalty that the Netanyahu government was intending to propose. And for me, that would have been the moment at which I suspended the association agreement. You can't have an apartheid law like that imposing the death penalty on Palestinians. You just can't do that. And so this is something which continues to be in the forefront of our minds. We're very concerned about that, and the S&D group since then have continued to flag up that the Commission has got to do more in terms of sanctions and more in terms of evolving its position. But as far as the Council is concerned, we are not in a position where we can really move forward as Europe as a whole, because there are some governments which have positions which are putting the brake on the imposition of sanctions. So this is problematic. We've done what we can, but we continue to work. Whether I'm optimistic or not, well, I struggle to say that I'm actually optimistic because of the reality out there, and having seen the utterly scandalous situations in which we've found ourselves, with all kinds of triangulation going on and nothing constructive and nothing really defensible as a position. When genocide is taking place, anti-apartheid legislation is being introduced. What on earth has to happen for the Council to respond and to implement and enforce the sanctions that exist against Israel? What on earth has to happen to give them the reality check they need, to make them actually realise that they need a wake-up call, that they're actually going to do something? So I wouldn't say I'm optimistic, but I hope.
Then solo una cosa sulla permanenza nella
And could you just comment on whether
we have to close now because of the next group. Maybe we can come back to you bilaterally. Thanks a lot for your questions. Thank you, Iratxe, and have all a good week. Merci.